What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, we got a big one. We're looking back at one of the all-time greats and maybe one of the bigger games we've ever covered on this channel, Batman Arkham Asylum, celebrating its 15-year anniversary. You know, we've done a couple of these. So when we think of 2009, right, you have Infamous, you have Prototype. Those ones we've kind of already done. Brutal Legend, actually more of a deep cut. We got games like Borderlands and Dragon Age that we'll be getting to actually on the channel in the next couple of months. 2009, looking back, was absolutely a stellar year for new franchises, games like this, which, you know, connected to an IP, but a brand new freaking game for Batman. And the significance of this game, we've talked about it for 15 years, right? There's not going to be, I think, that much said in this video that you probably haven't heard over the last 15 years, but I want to dedicate this video, go through this game. I replayed it to celebrate the 15-year anniversary. And it's a masterpiece, and I gotta be real, I was really looking at it through a critical lens this time. I guess, have I really ever done that before? Maybe like the other Batman games, but to be honest with you, Asylum came out way before my YouTube channel came out, and, you know, while I've covered the DC games and covered the Arkham games, I don't think I've ever looked at Arkham Asylum under like a critical YouTuber type lens. This was really the first time, and I walk away from it liking it more. I've always said this is my favorite Batman Arkham, although it's probably not the best Batman Arkham. I think, you know, popular opinion, Arkham City tends to be the favorite, right? And not just the favorite, but also the best actual game. But Arkham Asylum has always been mine. This is the game that kicked it off, and just such a special thing. So we're going to talk about it, my experience when it first came out, and my experience right now replaying it for the 15-year anniversary. As always, let me know in the comments, you know, your thoughts on the game, your experience with the game. Leave a like, subscribe, all that jazz. Let's get into it. So my story begins back in 2009. I'll keep this brief because I want to talk about it, you know, nowadays. But in 2009, I got my PS3 back in June, and I've told this story before because I got it for Prototype, okay? I didn't know about Batman Arkham. I didn't know about Uncharted. I didn't even know about Infamous. Well, Infamous maybe a little because of the Prototype thing. But I get my PS3 in June of 2009. And like I said, 2009 was a great year to get into that PS3 360 gen because you had everything, literally everything, and you were going to get even more as the years kept going. Fast forward to August, right? And I see the IGN review. This is back when IGN, for me, was more respected. This is back when I cared what IGN said about it, and they were one of the only ones I really knew about that was covering games back then. Obviously, there were many more, but I knew. So I see the review for it, and it's incredible. Now, I didn't know much about superhero games, but I did know that stigma where it's like we didn't have any. And if we did, they were kind of 50-50. Now, I had played like the Teen Titans game, and, you know, there were a few back in the day. And this was also during the age of all those Spider-Man games and whatnot. But, you know, I was never really all that into it. And I see the review, and I see the Scarecrow level, and I see the beginning and all this stuff. I'm thinking, this game looks so good. And I'm new to the PS3 game. So on a whim, and this is one of the only times I've really ever done this in my life, on a whim, we go to Target, and I just buy the game with my own money. Pretty much every game, by the way, that I got, besides my birthday and Christmas, I got, you know, by myself with my own money. But I come home, fire this thing up, and, you know, the world changes, right? I was still playing at the time, by the way, with the block TV, okay? If you want to think, I guess, how old I was, or, you know, we didn't have a lot of money. We did not have a lot of money. It was reflected in the television at the time. And I actually remember, I think that's when we were starting to get, like, the Panasonic, you know, like, flat screen TV. And Arkham was like that upgrade period. So like we had the block TV, but we like cycled to the flat screen. And I just remember this game looking unbelievable. Like, you know, Prototype I thought looked like a pretty good game. And it was a thing that kind of changed my life where it's like, oh, this is what new gen or next gen looks like. But Batman Arkham, I was like, holy dear God. And I fell in love with it. I remember I would always play sitting on the floor, call me weird, whatever. Sitting on the floor, I'd actually be listening to Green Day on a CD player, and I would be playing the challenge maps just over and over and over, the map where you just get the highest score possible before you die, which, by the way, I went back to do, and I got very, very high. The footage I'm showing you is not me at my best. After I hit end recording, I actually got a combo hit of 160, which really elevated my overall score and put me, I think, in the top like 10,000 or so in the leaderboard. So I felt really good about myself playing it nowadays, but I remember doing that. I beat the story, I feel like, in 2 or 3 days. You know, it came out very end of August, my school at the time started right after Labor Day in September. So I remember beating the thing like right before school started, and I just absolutely loved it. Again, I didn't really think about it critically where it's like, was the ending something that could have been improved, with Joker with the serum and stuff? It's like, maybe, that's one of the only weaknesses I can think of the game. But, back then I was just having a blast going through this rogues gallery of Batman villains. And I think nowadays it's so perfect. Back then, just being like completely amazed with everything, right? So, that made its mark. And from that point on, I was in and got all of them day one after that, City Origins and Night, and really fell in love with the series. And the importance of the series nowadays is, again, something you couldn't even think of back then, right? The free flow combat and that making its way all throughout. And there are so many games now that copy it. It got injected into other WB games like Shadow of Mordor, which I think is a really good kind of put together, making a Nemesis system, making a new thing there, but also having the free flow maybe at its best. But in Arkham Asylum, it's a little bit slower. It's a little bit janky. And I like that jank, to be honest with you. It reminds me of the time. Because while I'm countering, right, when you see the marks and you're countering and you're striking, and sometimes you'll just drop the combo because Batman can't get to an area fast enough or whatever it might be. And I think about it and I think, was this in Arkham Knight? And you think, no, Arkham Knight was probably the most polished of the free flow, for those Arkham games. But I just think, what? This was the time, though. This was the first time they had ever done it. And I don't look at that as a negative on this game, actually, at all. I mean, is it? I guess it is, right? But I think of it as this is just what it was like. They were getting used to it, and just how the combat actually works is so special that, there's a little jank, and it gets more polished as the games and as the years go, but there's something very special about that first time. And to me, there's also something very special about the environment and where this game was set, and that takes us, to Arkham itself. Now, I'm not a comic guy, and I've said that, 1,000 times in all my DC videos. I really don't know all that much. And, did I know the characters in the game? Yeah, the ones you're supposed to know, I knew, right? You see Killer Croc, and Killer Croc is so freaking good. You see Scarecrow, you see Bane, you see Joker, Harley, etc. But, if it gets to, Calendar Man, can I honestly say I knew who Calendar Man before 2009 was? I don't think I probably could. Even, Hush and Firefly and things like that. Number one, by the way, so many Easter eggs in this game that are so freaking good. But yeah, I didn't know about this. I was just going through the gallery of villains, right? But again, looking back at it now, it changed things. The free flow combat alone, but also you just think about the superhero genre and it proving to everybody that it works. And it was kind of condensed. It really only worked in certain circumstances, right? You kind of had to make a game like this, at least at the time, to prove that it worked. And I would argue Spider-Man was the second proving of it, right? Where it's it's kind of only been Arkham. There's really not any other, superhero games that are even happening. Oh, Spider-Man. Oh, Spider-Man takes a lot of what made Arkham special. In fact, the first Spider-Man is very much borrowing that kind of theme and that kind of energy. Oh, Spider-Man proved it again. Still, we really haven't had that, branch outs or, outpouring, of other superhero games. You haven't had Wonder Woman yet. You haven't had Wolverine yet. There's opportunity there, right? Okay, but now looking at it from 2024, right? I think this game is so freaking good. So I played it in the Return to Arkham collection. I want to address that because the one weakness with this game, maybe besides the ending, is actually the remaster. The remaster is a very, very poor remaster. The remaster is something, to put it, and it's been said, I'm sure, 1,000 times, right? To put it simply, the remaster, I feel takes a lot of the energy. This is what it felt to me. Took a lot of the energy and the tone away from the game. Now, it's one of the easier ways of playing it. I do actually have the game on PS3, so I'm very thankful. I got it on PS3, so you get the Joker add-on, which, was back in the day of doing that. It's cool, but it's also man, you get screwed out of it if you're not in that ecosystem. Again, at the time, I just got my PS3 2 months before, so I didn't know any better, right? Oh, you can play as Joker. This is freaking awesome, and he is very awesome, by the way. But I just wanted to throw that out there, where the footage you're seeing is the Return to Arkham. Does it look polished or more polished? Yes, it does. Batman looks better, and some of the characters literally look better. But there's a lighting to it. The lighting is, I believe, the main thing that's actually been, injected into it. And sometimes, when you have this gritty, you think about the late 2000s, early 2010s, you think to Arkham Asylum, you think to Gears of War, you think to Infamous or Prototype, that grainy, dark, gray kind of, lighting and atmosphere. I mean, were many games doing it? Yeah, so it kind of got tiring, but it was an era, and the remaster, I think, takes away from that. So it's probably not the preferred place to play, Arkham Asylum in 2024, but honestly, I can still picture it. If I'm thinking Bane from like The Dark Knight Rises, you can just picture these things happening, right? I can picture the tone and it being kind of darker and like grittier and slimy, or whatever adjectives you want to use. I can picture that and just play it, in the version that I was. But my dear God, one thing I want to say is the game is a lot shorter than I remember it being. It took me only like 5.5, 6 hours maybe to beat it now, and at this point, it's like clockwork, right? Like, I think I've played this game maybe 6 or 7 times, which, by the way, if you know me, pretty rare. Most games I only play once. Yes, because of this channel, I tend to replay them, but the most played games of my life probably get to like 4, 5, 6 times, and that's it. Maybe like the Sly Cooper games I've played more, but Batman Arkham Asylum is probably in my top 5 of games I've played the most, right? So I've probably played this game about 7 or so times, and I feel like it kind of keeps getting better every time. But the point is, you get used to it, right? I know the story beats. I know exactly where to go. Now in this, I was exploring, right? I'm trying to look at every small detail. I went out of my way at times to do a lot of the Riddler stuff, and I think I got about 55-60% of the Riddler stuff just in those 6 hours, just by going straight through, right? Because I'm like, okay, I know there's a trophy there. Oh, I know I have to take a picture of this at this point, and this is going to solve this riddle. It was like freaking clockwork, right? I knew what I was doing. So the game is shorter, but at the same time, there's a couple things to say there. It can be longer, depending on, what you want to do in it afterwards, and also if it's your first time. Number 2, it is such a well-paced game. And that, my friends, is something that on the 7th time, using this brain that I now have, I've developed it, right? But looking at it through this critical lens, it's something I've never really given this game credit for. And it's just how well balanced and paced everything is. And this is something I've never really also looked at with City, Origins, and Night, and something I really want to, because maybe this makes my case. Again, I've always thought, or this is my favorite. I guess I don't think it's the best one, but I'd like to look at the pacing of the other games, because I remember City's also kind of being perfect, even though it's a bigger world, but Arkham Asylum is so good. The beginning is perfect, and every couple minutes you get something. It's a very nice story that's not too complicated, but it has a couple twists and turns, and it just leads you so organically to the next thing. And the way they introduce gadgets and areas being blocked off, but as soon as you get a gadget, you think, oh, I remember there was that wall and I couldn't get through it, but now I have the gel, and now and they do it the whole game. Oh, I got this. Well, I remember not being able to get to that area. Maybe I need the zip line. And I mean, of course, I know at playing it on, attempt 7, right? But, even the first time, it walks you through it so naturally. There's also very little moments of like dead air or dead space. Everything is condensed, and it's semi-open world. Like, you think of Arkham City, it's not the same thing, right? But like Arkham Asylum, there is room to explore. There's only a couple like sections of the island itself, right? But there's different buildings, and again, you can go back and you can find the Riddler trophies, and there's constant communications. You can listen to thugs talk. Joker is talking quite a bit, and the acting is phenomenal. Mark Hamill does a 10 out of 10 job. Kevin Conroy does a 10 out of 10. Everybody does so freaking good, right? But it's always doing something. It's either the great story, or you're going through the gallery of villains. So like Scarecrow, injects himself into the situation, no pun intended. And it's so natural, right? And so you deal with Scarecrow. Then after that, you deal with the next thing and the next thing. And in between, you're hearing communications, you're hearing the music, you're hearing the great, the sound system noise that they always play, which is iconic now in my head, right? Whenever you hear it, you think like Joker here, and it's like, oh my God, it's so good. But there's never a moment to kind of just, and this is a good thing, right? I mean, there are games where it's like, let me just sit here. Let me just sit here and kind of like take it in. You can do that in this game while everything else is also happening. You can take in how good it is, and how, Bane is so amazing, and Harley is so amazing, and Killer Croc, and Scarecrow, and Joker, and this and that, and this and that. You can do all that while listening to them talk, while beating up enemies and you're hearing on the loudspeaker. The game's also pretty dynamic. Like, yes, it'll repeat itself, but, you know, in moments when you're when you're having to take enemies out, right, using the gargoyles, and Joker will tell them, hey, you might want to check, like, that area. Sometimes he'll give away locations. Sometimes he'll just say, hey, you want to check the thing, or it's so cool. Yes, it repeats itself, and he'll sometimes say the same lines in the same area. So you'll be in one zone dealing with everybody, and then he'll call something out, and he'll do it again, especially if you take too long. You know, he'll call things out repeatedly. But there's that too, you know, I think of objectives, and this game, because of the different gadgets, have different ways of giving you objectives to solve. The bosses are actually also pretty cool. Now, Joker's is a little light. I gotta be real, because Joker is easier to take out than a lot of the tightened up enemies in this game, which looking at it now, I never really kind of put that together. I think his design is freaking amazing. When he's grabbing you and he's got the freaking bones sticking out, oh my God, he looks sick. He literally looks sick, but he looks so incredibly cool. But, you know, taking him out, it's like, well, you fought two enemies right before that, and I would argue that they were maybe a little harder to take out than Joker, just because of sheer number of them, right? So, you know, they don't do a perfect job all the time, but I think, like, Poison Ivy is really cool. Bane is kind of just like a jacked up Titan type enemy, so there's nothing too special about it. But again, just seeing them, and at the time, and it still looks really pretty now, like, yes, there's some aging, and yes, it's been 15 years, but at the time, every cutscene, just my eyes were just like because it looks so good. It looks so beautiful. And again, like, that was 2 months in. I had never seen Uncharted, and Uncharted, I think, came out like that year, that maybe August as well, but like, I had never seen that stuff before, right? So when I see prototypes opening, you know, movie kind of thing, or Infamous, or, you know, whatever, I'm thinking, holy dear God, games can do this, and Batman just looks so good, and it still does. Like, the environment looks so pretty. The environment looks so great. The character models look so great. The cutscenes are so great. And a thing that I look at, I kind of want to get into this as well. You know, I mentioned free flow. Let's kind of go into that a little bit more. So I've said it before, like, I'm a martial artist. So, like, Cobra Kai, I think I take a little too seriously, you know, versus other people. So I'm always, like, looking at the moves, like, you know, how they're blocking and how they're striking. And Arkham Asylum is really good. Now, there's always been jank. There's always been, you know, when you're punching them in, like, the nether regions, and, you know, like, some of the strikes that are just not actually hitting them. And I think about it now, and, like, some of the takedowns, you know, you, like, break their arm or, like, get them in, like, a wrist lock, and then they just, I guess, get knocked out. Could that happen? I mean, yeah, you can send your body into that state, I suppose, but, you know, is there a little jank with that stuff? Yes, but some of the stuff that he does, especially, I saw Joker do a little, like, literally Aikido move where he's, like, dragging the person, he, like, throws them, and I learned that move in the form of martial arts known as Aikido. Batman, he does multiple blocks and strikes and takedowns where he's got, like, an arm bar kind of thing going on. It's so good. So, like, the martial arts side of me is like, holy God, very, very impressive, and also dynamic. And you think about how it literally works, right? Like, the strikes are a little silly when he's floating from one end to the next, right? And like I said, this game is not as advanced as the other games. So if they are too far, he will lose his combo. He will. Or, you know, sometimes if an enemy is not in the right spot or you press it the wrong way, if you're doing an execution or a throw, it'll drop. It'll drop that input / drop the combo. And it can get a little aggravating, right, when you're trying to get now, again, I just did the Predator missions and the combo things afterwards where I got up to, you know, I got the trophies and all that jazz. But it's so fun to play the game. So whether you're going through, like, little vents, right? Whether you're on the gargoyles and you're planning things out, you're saying, okay, if I do this inverted takedown over here, maybe I can blow up that wall over there. That part of the game is so special and really makes you feel like you're hunting these people. And I don't think we had anything like that before. And I guess I don't know how many games could really do that nowadays, right? Because it's got to be like a certain situation, but it's so perfect. And so you have like the dark side of him, right? Where he's like the hunter and they're the prey. And then you have the combat side, which is my favorite. And it's just a thing that never really gets old because it's so fluid, it's so rewarding. The hits are nice and strong. Like, they look strong and they sound strong. Like, hearing the bones crunch is something I didn't really, I think, pay attention to originally, but you hear all the times he's like breaking their legs or breaking their arms, and it's like, Jesus, man. And I don't know, it's so much fun to just actually play and to be able to get the counters and all that stuff. Again, there's a little jank. It's not as, sometimes if an attack would come, and I think they fixed this later on, if you were doing like a throw, or if you were about to strike somebody to like end them, right, and then somebody attacks you, in this game they'll just hit you, right? I think in future games they kind of disconnect those inputs, where if you're trying to do the jumping on the person and punching them to kind of finish them, and somebody attacks you, you can pause and do the counter to that person. And they didn't have that here, right? So, it's honestly a little harder because of that, because you have to account for a little bit of a delay. You have to be wary of where everybody is, where if somebody gets too far, you might want to get them closer somehow. And that's not something I think you have to worry about as much in future games. Also, again, like things you're allowed to do, or even your gadgets, they're limited, right? So like even gadgets you're able to use in combat is far less than what what you will use as these games continue. But again, there's a little bit of a rawness to that, right? Where it's like, okay, you're dealing with what they give you. You don't have the most gadgets. You have a game that, you got to keep everybody a little bit closer. You have to watch where you are and what you're doing as somebody attacks. You almost have to think about when the AI will attack you before they even do it, because you have to plan on those things in order to keep the combo going. But it adds that strategy to it, and it's just so special. So, I mean, the combat, the gameplay just in general is amazing. Arkham Asylum as a situation is so freaking good. I kept mentioning like the gallery of villains, but I think Arkham Asylum is the perfect place to do it, right? Because you have the interview tapes, and there's so many, I mentioned Riddler stuff. There's so much side stuff to do. There's so much things to find, whether it's the Spirit of Arkham or the interview tapes or anything, Riddler trophies just in general. There's a lot that makes a lot of sense, I think, to be there. My favorite, personally, is those interview tapes, because it's just... games, I feel like, don't put that amount of effort into the backstory nowadays as they did back then. And I mean, maybe that's wrong, or maybe some games do it now, but not all. But I just feel, because you get the story itself. And if you never saw any of the background stuff, right, I think it's still such a great... because you're just running through things at a very nice pace, and, you have some great villains, and you have some great arcs and some great themes and all that stuff. But then when you find these interview tapes, it's like, well, let's listen to, what is a Joker interrogation type interview thing sound like? What does that literally sound like? What does Scarecrow sound like? What do all these... and you just find that, and it's so freaking good. So the game, I think, just never stops being good, right? Like I said, in terms of weaknesses, the ending is probably the only thing. I like how they got there, though. Like, the interesting thing, I think it's just the boss fight, to be honest, because like Joker's plan was not to do that, right? Like, he wasn't going to... maybe he would have injected himself, but the point was not to inject himself, right? At least that wasn't his plan A. So, like, I'm not mad with how they got there. I'm not mad with, like, Batman spoils his plan, like, left, right, and center, and he has to kind of adapt as the night goes. So none of that's a problem. It's just simply... and even like, like him trying to get on TV and all that stuff, and, being at the top of like the tower so that everybody sees him and whatnot. But just the fight itself was just, he's gloating and then you pull him down. He's gloating and then you pull him down. And that's it. That's like the fight. Now, like his goons are the fight. Beyond that, there is no fight. So it's like, I feel like they could have done a little bit more. I mean, they're in a tough spot because Joker's not like that, right? Joker's not the type that you would think of as like a Bane fight, or even like maybe a Poison Ivy thing. Like, he doesn't rely on himself. He kind of relies on other things. So, they were kind of trapped there maybe a little bit. And to be honest with you, that is like the boss fight itself is one of, if not the only, weaknesses of this game. And for that, there's 500 good things. Oh, one other part. I forgot to say this, and I've probably mentioned in passing when I've talked about Asylum in the past, but so the Scarecrow Part 3 or whatever it is, when the game freezes. Now, a theme here, right, is like I was an idiot, right? I was 13 years old. I just got my PS3. I didn't know how these things worked. So I'm playing it, and that got me. I was reaching. Now, I had the fat PS3, right? So the fat PS3 had not the button, but like you would go over the sensor and it could turn itself on or off, right? So I sit on the ground when I'm playing this, and my PS3 is roughly within reach. So I go through, I'm starting to walk, and the screen starts to break. I had, at the time, like a panic attack, because I was like, 2 months into my PS3, my second or third, I played like Resistance, Motorstorm, Prototype. Maybe that's kind of it. So this was maybe my fourth PS3 game I ever played, right? Fourth PS3 game, 2 months in, it breaks, like the coding, and I'm like, what is going on? So I reached for the power button, and then it went to the next scene. And I remember, like, when the screen starts to crack and like fall apart, and then it kind of goes dark, and then it reboots with the start of the game. During that black screen, I was this close. I was like in the process of turning it off, and then the game boots itself back up, I guess, in a way, right? And then you're playing as the opposite. And my God, by the way, what a freaking scene that was. Again, like, so much of the key story is so freaking good. That was so incredible. Every Scarecrow one, like, you start to realize it even back then. But the first time when Gordon died, I had no idea. No idea. I was like, oh, what is going on? Like, and even when I was in the room investigating the bodies, I thought that was part of the game. Like, I thought Gordon died, and this was just where the story was going. I didn't realize, like, the toxin and stuff. You see it. Like, he starts to cough right before he becomes little Bruce, and, with his mom and dad. Like, you see that coming, and you could even technically see the third one when the game breaks. But those scenes are so freaking good. But I wanted to throw out that story of mine where it got me. Like, I was probably this close from actually turning off my PS3 because I was kind of scared. I was like, oh my God, the game broke. Nowadays, I feel like it happened faster. Like, it goes through the breaking part faster than it did back then. Or maybe I was just trapped, like all these thoughts were going in my head in that one moment where it's like, I'm a 13-year-old. I bought my PS3. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to restart it and hopefully everything's going to be okay. And then, you reach for, and all that stuff happens in like a split second and the game fixes itself. So a masterpiece of a game, truly, from beginning to end, from the combat to the exploration to the world itself to the characters to the story. Need I continue? It is such a special game, and we say it all the time, but going back, and I just replayed about a week ago from when I'm recording this, the game is so special, and it captures things that just very few games, even today, if this game came out today, it would probably be top 2 game of the year right now. Like, it really would, because it's just so good, and it really hasn't aged all that. Like, it hasn't aged bad, and it hasn't aged in general. Like, so many of the elements that make that game special still apply to this day. The only thing is, it is rather short. 6 hours if you're going through it, I guess, at lightning pace where where everything is. Yes, you can get it longer. And I remember this game taking probably closer to 10 hours when I wasn't keeping track of myself, but I'm sure it took me longer than 6 hours. But yeah, the memories. I mean, I'll always remember downloading it. I remember always playing as Joker and thinking that was so cool. I'll always remember, I had a CD player and I can picture it in my head listening to the very first Green Day album. I would swap it in and out, but listening to the very first Green Day and just trying to get the highest hit combo. That takes me back to 13-year-old me entering, I guess, what would be 8th grade. I was going into 8th grade. So, the times. And maybe that's why it's so special to me. This is a game, along with Prototype and Arkham Asylum, defined the first couple months of the PS3 gen. Even though neither were exclusive, it defined to me what being in that generation was about. And then that got backed up when I eventually did play Infamous, and I played Uncharted that Christmas. So I played Batman Arkham before Uncharted 1, then got into Uncharted 2 and all that jazz. Heavy Rain came out the year after, all that. So these were my introduction into what the next gen was, and I couldn't have, I think, picked, at least for this game. I love Prototype. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I think these two are perfect games to get introduced to it. Maybe you would disagree, but you can let me know in the comments. So let me know what you think about the game. As always, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.